Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzur-Ramosi-Thurlow scale,
or MOTS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode.
Greetings, comrades, and welcome to the Lost Signals Reviews Film and Television. I am, of course, your General Secretary for tonight, Scott Thurlow, and here with my plotting chancellors and deputies against me, Jonathan Ian Manzer.
All hail Stalin, I suppose.
Long live Thurlow, of course, and Stephen Amosi.
Comrades.
And Chris Morgan.
Guten Tag.
Yes, and we're going to do the comedy history satire Death of Stalin, which came out in 2017, directed by Armando Iannucci, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And I believe E has a quick logline for us.
Blackadder Series 5.
Yes!
Nice if you get
Nice.
that. Indeed. And so I will describe the plot. So yeah, it's set in 1953 Russia, Soviet Union. Steve Buscemi is in it. A number of, basically his inner circle, his inner council, and Stalin has a debilitating heart attack and dies shortly thereafter. And it's basically his little inner circle, again, jockeying for power, trying to outdo each other, trying to one-up each other, and just hijinks ensue. Some very dark references to actual atrocities from the era, but again, satirized a bit, somewhat of the rough edge softened off, but still, certainly there in the film. And at the end of it, they basically pin, not that he's undeserving, a man named Lavari Beria, who was, again, I think he was head of the NKV security at the time. They sort of use him to stage a coup against him and pin many of the crimes and the former atrocities on him.
If I may, Lavrenti, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Lavrenti Beria. Yeah, so, and that actually happened. He has done a bunch of research upon the actual, historical elements of the film uses, so we'll talk about that as it goes along. But it's basically that, and Khrushchev, Nikita Khrushchev, of course, famous, from the Cold War 60s. He's the one who sort of comes out on top, or at least leads the coup against him, recruiting various of Zhukov, General Zhukov, the Russian general, and so forth. So yeah, it's basically almost a Monty Python kind of thing, modernized of that era and that period and that what was happening at that point. So yeah, it's pretty I've seen this. I think it's the third time I've seen it all the way through. So given all that, I think I'm looking at a pretty solid 2. I almost want to say 3, but I don't think it's that quite strong. I think it does hold together. It's almost 4 chapters, kind of Tarantino style. Each little section is broken up by a little quote from the actual articles of communism, is relevant, funnily relevant to what's about to happen in given chapter. So yeah, overall, I think it's a strong enough plot for a 2. But with that, I'll open it up.
Yeah, I mean the chapter, the title cards, I guess, that they talk about, the articles are all relevant to what happens when the head of state dies and the various things. I agree. I think it's a very strong 2, if not possibly a 3. I might give it a 3. I really enjoy this movie. I think that the way that it's told in terms of plot maybe a little not weaker, but I think that the strength of this movie is the satire and the comic parts of it. It's just, to me, it's a really funny movie about a really fucked up time in the world, and especially in Russia. But yeah, all the everything from them, not calling a doctor because there's no doctors left in Russia because they killed them all, and just all the scheming and things laid bare is really great. The way that it's done in the film. So yeah, I agree with you. I think I'm thinking about a strong 2. I could definitely be convinced of a 3, depending on what you guys have to say.
Politics never change.
Should have been a lockdown, I guess. But okay.
I had to throw it in there. Go on, Ian.
Okay. This is shockingly historically accurate. I would say maybe 85% accurate.
Pretty highly
Now, some events are
condensed, maybe.
Condensed is a great word for it, yes. Like, for instance, yes, the Beria did get arrested by Khrushchev in the exact same manner of the pressing of the button to signal the general to do the coup. It was 5 months before he was executed, but it was barely a trial. I don't think he was allowed a defense. But I mean, a lot. The opening scene of Stalin asking for a recording, and they had to redo the recording, did happen 9 years prior to Stalin's death. But it's still like funny tales of, and the inner conflict is very true to what happened there. I would say that the portrayal of Markelov seems to be inaccurate to how he was in real life. He seemed to be very strong style.
He wasn't as cowardly
and committed atrocities.
Yeah, Jeffrey Tambor plays Malenkov.
Malenkov, yeah.
Deputy secretary, like second in line, ostensibly.
Georgy Malenkov.
But generally, like, it's impressively. Truth is stranger than fiction, and like, I might give it a 3-4, depicting absurd events in the best British absurd way possible.
Okay.
But if you're a fan of history, I think this is one of the best accurate retellings of a historical event possible, but with a snarky, jokey side to it.
Parody on it. What do you think, Chris?
I'm kind of. See, the thing is, I was walking into here thinking about it too, because narratively, as a film, there is a bit of a disconnect, and this might be a spoiler to later in the our podcast, but it's definitely a film I want to watch again.
I caught things this time upon this like repeat viewing that I didn't notice earlier, and I've seen it more than one time. So,
I mean, I understand, consolidating things for historical accuracy for the point of a narrative of the piece. But right now I'm looking at it pretty strong too. I do not know what the disconnect was, because to be honest with you, I was kind of distracted by things like Molotov was played by Michael Palin and Zukov was played by Jason Isaacs. And I thought they were perfectly cast, but it's also...
the cast is amazing. Yeah, I agree with that.
But the thing is, Steve Buscemi as Khrushchev was like, Steve Buscemi was, believe it or not, understated in a lot of ways. It's definitely a role he could have overplayed, and he didn't. I thought there was a lot of places that the film showed great restraint. But I don't know, maybe it was because I was sitting there trying to catch up with regard to how historically accurate it was. It was
quite.
That's the weird part about it.
I was like,
and it's not, even if I said it's condensed, it's not really all that condensed. There are certain aspects to it that were, but in general,
by and large, no.
He was Malikov was he was out within a week of being premier, and Khrushchev took over. Like, it's all was very rapid, and so I'm just saying, narratively they condensed a couple parts, but generally this is
not as much.
Like I said, before precast, I was saying that the Zukov, the amount of medals he on him was actually less than he actually did, because the filmmaker didn't think that people would actually buy the fact that like you said, Ian, truth is stranger than fiction, and that the man seemed like ornamentally was more flamboyant than he was actually portrayed in the film. And I did mean to do the research that Ian did prior to the podcast, but I don't know. I'm wavering now on it between a 2 and a 3.
All right, I'm sticking with it 2, a strong one, but I think the historical accuracy parts I'm going to mostly bump into style instead of plot per se, instead of narrative. So like while I can respect the hell out of it for keeping by and large to actual history, I think like you said, Chris, narratively wise, like it just doesn't quite get to a 3, but that's not saying it's not well done overall. So
that's a good point. I might follow suit. That
Yeah, I'll stick with the 2.
I want to briefly show something here, which is what Zukov looks like. He apparently had more medals than this.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And even like when you see this in the first time, you see that part, you're like, that's fucking ridiculous. Like, there's no way that's real, right?
Yeah,
like, it's over exaggerated, but really it's under exaggerated,
which is so insane.
Yeah.
There's a great statue of him on a horse.
Yeah, in Russia, it's amazing.
So
right.
I think Ian, I think you convinced me that I'm going to go with a 3 on this. I really enjoyed the historical accuracy of everything. Scott and Chris, you're sticking with 2s?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we'll move on to themes, and it'll be E.
The director of this created Veep and was showrunner on Veep.
Yeah, if you didn't know that. Yep.
And he is about playing with the absurdity of politics. Veep was all about that in American politics. This is all about that in Russian politics. There's a great quote. I forget who said it, but so I apologize for stealing this from you, unknown author. But that most American politicians think they're in House of Cards, but they're really
actually in Veep.
And I think, but the thing is, all of the sentiment that he was getting across with Veep plays out in Death of Stalin, which is an accurate representation of historical events, making flanderizing certain characters,
Sure.
I suppose, but taking the piss out of the Russian premiers after the death of Stalin. And you know what? I had a lot of fun with it. If you again, like, I think thematically is what they're going for. It's mocking authority to make a point on the absurdity of politics.
Yeah, I mean, the absurdity of politics, the last phrase you said there is what I was going to say, as well as my major theme, because I think it's clearly there. And yeah, and like maybe this sort of spirals out to other questions, but because they're addressing that, right, like it's very well, like it's nailed down. They nail it without being like over the top about it, without constantly punching you in the face, as an audience. So yeah, of course it's the farcical, like I said, somewhat Monty Python British style, like your commentary and like ridiculous parodies of it. But I still think it does address, again, the actual atrocities that were happening and perpetrated at the time, with like not even making light of them, but yes, making a joke, but still like showing you that this shit was real. And
they're not mocking the events; they're mocking the people behind the events.
Exactly. Right. I think that's a good difference there, and for sure, I'm giving it themes of 1 because of that, if nothing else. So go, Chris.
Well, 2 things. Number 1, this first part may get a style in that they decided to keep everybody with their natural accents.
Yes.
So as not to distract.
There's no fake bullshit like Russian accents for no reason.
Yeah.
No, but as somebody, and this is, I am going to use my age as historical. I grew up most of the time knowing the Russian premier was Brezhnev. And then in the 80s, it was like whoever was alive at the time, because Brezhnev died and then drop off. And then, so it was really the ending where they said that Brezhnev, I didn't realize Brezhnev took power like in 1964.
No.
So having Brezhnev at that last shot kind of sitting behind
Khrushchev,
Khrushchev, I thought was, to me, filled in in one moment, a lot of things to me personally got filled in. I'm definitely giving it a 1 because again, to Ian's point, truth is way stranger than fiction. The way politics works. I mean, everybody looks at it now and being like, "Oh, Trump, blah 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 blah." It's just like, yeah, but this you are there aspect of the lack of reflection as we had prior to like the internet and CNN and all that stuff that happened during George W. Bush's tenure. We got kind of used to being the you are there for whoever was in power. So I think this was a really great representation of what we may have
Sure.
viewed to a certain extent. Should all this technology have been available back then? So I'm definitely giving it a very strong one. I found it very, very fascinating to watch the machinations
unfold. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that the depiction of the surreality of of things that what happen when there's this weird power vacuum like this. And I don't know. I really dug all of that and playing into talking about the power dynamics that were involved and all these different mind games that all the players were playing against each other and things like that. I thought that it was really strong in terms of that. So yeah, I agree. I'm gonna give it a 1. And
So. Team's pretty solid. All right, that'll bring us down.
I want to make one correction to me. It wasn't George W. It was George H.W. Gulf War I, where everything. I mean, just in case anybody's watching this and being like, "Motherfucker, you're wrong."
Right.
It was George H.W. CNN Gulf War I, where we really got a chance to see things that were happening as they were happening. We kind of got used to it very quickly during Clinton and so forth, but
sure. Got you.
And might I say that I am very much looking forward to the Russian depiction of the Trump presidency about 20 years from now.
In their film?
Yeah.
Sure.
This film was banned 2 weeks before it was supposed to be released.
I remember that. That's right. Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
They didn't like the portrayal of Zukov.
Yeah. It's like the interview. Anyway, that's all. It's ones all around for themes. Quite strong. And we'll move on to antagonists, and it'll be you, Chris. Power vacuums.
Yeah, I was going to say power vacuums are definitely the antagonists. I mean, it would be very easy to say
corrupt politics.
Well, God damn it, I'm blocking his name.
Beria.
Sorry,
Beria.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, if you look at Beria, it's just like, oh, they're calling him the liberal, but all of his ideas that were antithetical to Stalin were just a political ploy. There wasn't any real merit behind them. They weren't like he was any more lenient. He was just doing it as a power grab. So it is one of those things where the antagonist isn't a persona, but it is the power grab. It is the what people will do to have and maintain power. I mean, it's disgusting. I mean, I could go on more because you watch it happen now. I'm not going to go into current politics.
I mean, it's never changed.
Biden.
Isn't it sad that when we grow up, we have an ideal of these great these great leaders who shaped history, and then the more you find out about them, the more you realize they're all buffoons.
The more they're monsters.
Yeah.
Or both.
The thing is, their monstrosity is born out of buffoonery and hypocrisy.
Yes,
and an immediacy of with no forethought for power. And I think that it's never changed. We're in a cycle of charlatans claiming to be great men.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. Sorry, I don't have much to say, but I do agree with that. Let's go on to it. I'm giving it a 1. Yeah, I think it is that. Granted, it's filtered through, of course, a certain slice of history, but that's not really specific to that part of history because it's always been the case with humans and people in these positions. So, go on.
There's a musical called 1776 about the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and there's one scene where Thomas Jefferson comes in and says that he's released the slaves, and it's to Ian's point. It's just like, well, yeah, that was done. Yeah, that was true, but within context of the narrative, it wasn't.
No, he released his baby mama.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, right. But it is funny when you look back upon revisionist history. Whether it be for entertainment or for nationalistic superiority, so to speak, it is a very interesting exercise, so to speak.
Well, the Dick Cheney of the bear, the penguin. I'm going to call him the penguin because I can't remember names right now. I think that he's the main antagonist of this. If you consider Khrushchev to be the protagonist, he's the
most antagonistic character.
Well, he's the immediate threat for Khrushchev, in that they're both jockeying for power, and Khrushchev is spending the majority of it trying to both counter and one-up him in certain situations. So I think that, yes, buffoonery is all well and good, but it's we're following one buffoon fighting against another buffoon.
Yeah, I think it works on either level.
I think the persona of him is really, really important in that it shows that you will manipulate whatever you need to. I mean, he's not any better really than Stalin is, but just in terms of his political manipulation, what he does, why he does it.
He died on his knees before the court begging not to be killed.
Yep.
Even though he did not give that luxury, even though thousands, millions perhaps
died under
him the exact same way, and he didn't give a damn.
That's the irony of the, it's obvious. But
thank you for calling my point obvious.
It's fucking obvious, Ian. No, I completely agree with you. I think Barry is the actual antagonist of this, especially in light of the fact that Khrushchev eventually becomes a protagonist, right? Like at first, I feel like they are all kind of splitting duties.
And we're about to get to it, but yeah, I feel you.
And they kind of like break into camps towards like the middle of the film, maybe even a little bit later than that. But yeah, I completely agree. And I think that, sorry for calling your point obvious, Ian, but sometimes the obvious point is the best point.
Oh, thank you.
That's all I really have to say about that. I think that he plays a very good antagonist and a counterpoint to.
I also think he'd make a great penguin.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know,
Batman, right? Batman.
I feel like he should be acting opposite. What's his face? Sparkly Vampire.
Robert
Pattinson. I'm sorry I said that. He's a much better actor than.
Okay.
He deserves better than that. Anyway,
the guy from The Lighthouse.
If we could, yes.
So one's all around for that, right?
Yep, one's for Antag, and that'll be you, Steve-O. Bring us to protagonist.
Yeah, so it's Buscemi as Khrushchev, and at least for the last half of the movie or so, I think. And I think that he does a great job providing the other half of the buffoonery, as you call it, in it is like there's no character in this that is like really competent.
Like the moral and like intellectual, like fucking North Star, if you will.
Actually, dead, so we can't have a moral North Star there.
Yeah, probably the most competent character is what's his face, the general
Zhukov.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
But according to history, he was the most competent person.
Well, exactly. Like that, like he just came in, he took charge, he didn't make any very poor decisions in this, in the course of the film, like all the rest of the characters did at certain points. And a great supporting character, which we'll get to in a minute. But as far as Khrushchev goes and being the main protagonist, I think that Buscemi does a really good job of bringing him to life in terms of like just his desperation, like what he's willing to, like finding it believable what he was willing to do by the end of the movie, as opposed to like where he started as kind of like, because he's really the one who's the what do they say? I forget what word they use, but basically the liberal, right? Like he's
ostensibly he's a reformer.
Yeah, he's the one that's trying to change things that Beria starts saying that he's going to change because he wants the people on his side, right?
He's seeing which way the political wind blows, obviously, and following that.
So it's fascinating that Khrushchev eventually becomes the heavy-handed dictator, right? In light of where he started in this movie, and I really like that arc for him, and I'm going to give him a 1.
Yeah, so this one is like, for me, at first it was clear, but then like Ian and I were at least a bit discussing it beforehand, that like, to me, it's clearly Khrushchev, like he's the main character, but maybe you might make an argument like it's somewhat collectively like the ones who are like the least buffoonish and the most moral, like granted, of course, that's a sliding scale, don't get me wrong, But like I was going to argue, and I've at least the first 2 watches, I saw it as him because you see more of it through his eyes. Like you see more of his experiences, like his home life, a bit more versus all the other, at least the inner circle, the inner council.
Right.
So even if it's not that, like I'm giving him a 1, Buscemi as Khrushchev a 1 for sure. And even if we like you guys might slip in like or make an argument to count other characters, at least sign waving in and out through the narrative as like supporting main characters, if that makes sense. I don't know, but
secondary protagonist.
Yeah, secondary protagonist, exactly. So either way, I'll both ways I'll give it a 1. But with that, that's how I looked at it initially. So.
Well, the way I see it is like as far as Khrushchev being the protagonist, I agree, because history is written by the victors, and at the end of the game, objectively, Khrushchev was the victor.
I'm gonna bury you in history.
Well, objectively, Putin was the winner.
Yeah, but with regards to this story, if you're going to go to the end of this story, then Brezhnev was. But yeah, I agree with. Khrushchev was definitely the protagonist. I thought narratively and historically it made sense for him to be the protagonist. And they give him the 1. But just going back to Christ, what's his name?
Beria.
I'll bury you in history. Just remember it as a mnemonic. Go on.
Beria's execution as portrayed in the film, and I was just trying to look it up here. Reminded me of during the Bosnia-Herzegovina thing in the 90s. The leader was disposed, and he and his wife were taken basically in a backyard and executed outside of public. I was looking up the name, and I don't think I got it right, so I'm not going to. But it did remind me. But it did totally remind me of that story, and that. Whether it happened right then and there or it happened how many months later.
He was shot and cremated, from what I understand.
Yeah.
From what records seem to indicate.
But that just kind of seems like what happens when revolutions happen, whether they're overt or internal.
Sure. So, I mean, you're giving it a 1?
Yes, although I do want to confess that this is my second time watching it, and I could have sworn for some reason that Jeffrey Tambor's character, Malikov, is that it?
Yep,
Malenkov, yeah.
Malikov was the main character of this. And then I'm like, you convinced me, Scott, that it was Khrushchev.
Yeah, it's
but for some reason, I had in my head that
it was him.
It was him who was the force of being being manipulated by both the Penguin and Steve Buscemi.
I'll tell you this. He's like even more of a buffoon, being manipulated by other buffoons on either end.
Yeah.
All right. So,
although, again, from what I understand, an inaccurate portrayal of history.
Yeah, not quite. Like that's where the 20% drops off there on historic accuracy, we'll say. But either way, looks like we're all giving protagonists a 1, and that will bring me. And speaking of 2 secondary, which there are a couple, right? So we mentioned a bunch: Zhukov, Malenkov himself, Molotov. Well, Michael Palin, one of you mentioned, played by him. And there's like 2 or 3 ministers as well, like Minister of Trade, Minister of Defense, like something like that they introduce. Like, for example, when they find Stalin's body, like they all like rush in, like, right? So like that's essentially the inner circle. Yeah, essentially. Exactly. But yeah, so like the 4, 5, or 6 of them, counting Khrushchev as well, like as part of it, right? So I think they're all like solid. I'm leaning towards certainly giving them a 1. I think the portrayals are pretty great. Like we said, one of us said the casting was pretty top notch in all this. Even if I don't recognize all the actors per se, I think they all did a good job. And the film is also like a nice, it doesn't linger too long, but it tells you who they are and like sets them up like they're like, again, they're ridiculous buffoonishness in many instances, many scenes. But I'm still saying, I think like the core 4 or 5, like Jeffrey Tambor, you just mentioned, Malenkov, and all ones I just said, I think certainly collectively deserve a 1, and that's pretty much where I stand. So,
first of all, the general is absolutely amazing. I am fascinated by him as a historical figure as well. I'm planning to read up more about him. He released a biography that was heavily censored because he was critical of the Communist Party. I think in like the 70s he died. And it was later he had all the pieces of story and he released it all into the paper. But I would just say overall, like Stalin's son.
Oh yeah,
he's supposedly 100%.
Vasily was in fact a drunken asshole. Yeah,
he legitimately got an entire plane filled with hockey players killed by trying to fly an ice storm. It's supposedly like
it's ridiculous. Yeah.
Overall, because the director captures all these real people very well, maybe making slight hyperbole.
Sure, they're
them,
caricatures to a degree, but still, their actions are real.
It's fascinating.
No.
Yeah, I was going to mention Vasily. I thought he was hilarious. Just the portrayal was great, and I love that it's kind of like basically true to life. His daughter was really good. Stalin's daughter.
Svetlana.
Yeah, Svetlana was she was good.
Yep, she was damn solid for sure.
Actually, fun fact about her. She didn't go to Vienna. She actually stayed in Moscow and then defected to the U.S. And it became a huge propaganda campaign that Stalin's daughter defects to the U.S.
Of course.
So that's a little bit of divergence historically there, but she was still, I think, well portrayed, you're saying, in the film as well.
Yeah. And, just all the characters that had it, like the two guards standing at the door, at Stalin's door, were just hilarious.
That's Monty Python shit, but it was so good. Yeah.
Like, yeah, exactly. That's exactly my Monty Python shit. When they finally get, like, let go from their duties, they walk one way, and then you just see them running the other way as they're getting shot in the back. It's just really well done, and all the little character actors make it even a better film. I got to give supporting a really strong one.
Yep, fucking A. Chris, 1 as well, or
I'm giving supporting a 1 because without all the little other characters, for lack of a better word, there would have been no narrative, really. There would have been no. But on a personal note, Jason Isaacs and Michael Palin fucking warmed my heart.
Stand out for sure.
But
Isaacs at least, yeah.
That's a personal thing. Narratively, without all the other players, there could have really been no story.
I agree. I'll say a couple more things. Like, for example, there's even I guess they're more like tertiary characters, but the technically supporting where, for example, early on, there's a guy who gets hauled off to jail because his son reports him. And then as they power jockey, they decide to release the prisoner. So he comes back and has an awkward moment. It's not even like a scene, just looks at his son.
Yeah.
When they round up all the doctors who are of course, some of the worst doctors left because all the other real good doctors have been shipped off or killed. So they're they don't want to take responsibility for the diagnosis of Stalin, all that little shit. Like the director, the conductor that they haul out of bed at night to do the recording
while the raids are happening in his building.
It was actually 3 different conductors that they had to get.
Awesome. Yeah. So all that stuff, I think, is evidence for secondary being pretty strong, and we're all giving it a pretty solid 1.
Hold on real quick. Yes. In that vein, I just wanted to mention the scene where they bring back Molotov's wife.
Yes,
Palin is playing it she was a traitor, she's a bitch, and then she walks in. He's like, I love you, Paulina or whatever her name was.
Oh, my lovely dear. It's ridiculous. Again, absurdist parody, but spot on for that.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so let's move on to dialogue. Now about UE.
Someone mentioned this before, but it was a good choice to have everyone keep their accents for this, because this is heavily a British-style humor film. And there's a certain cadence that the Brits have that they can pull off a lot of their dry kind of
witticisms and so forth, yeah.
And it would have felt awkward with Russian accents. But it feels very natural to kind of a British comedy, as we've been bringing up, whether Blackadder or Monty Python or any of those kind of shows. And it feels very much in vein of that. I think there's some great... This is a very clever film. And obviously the director, who I also thought... he wrote this, correct?
Yep.
It's also based off a comic book. But nonetheless, there's a lot of historical detail put into the dialogue and making fun of... in a sense, the more you know about the events surrounding this,
the funnier it becomes.
Because they're making references to specific things in history in this. So I'm probably going to give it a 1 just by sheer the audacity of trying to pull off a comedy about the death of Stalin.
Like this. Yeah. I mean, I largely agree. So the point I took away from plot, I'm going to put 0.5 here and 0.5 to the next question. But I also agree, it would have been more distracting if they're okay, everyone do a Russian accent. There's no need for that. And you're right, the cadence works. And I think it's almost like a meta joke unto itself, where Buscemi obviously does not have a British accent, but he's still playing Khrushchev, and everyone else, largely does. Like so, like Zana like freaking out, like and, like going to the British titsy, if you will. So, yeah, but I'm just saying all the jokes work, the little banter, like the back and forth when like all of you. He has documents on all of you, not me. All of you is what he said, right? Like all that shit. Like again, like it's maybe somewhat style, but the delivery and what's there on the page for them to say, I think absolutely works and is hilarious when it needs to be, and like it's somewhat like you can be taken aback by what the things it portrays, like the actual, like you said, the dark things that were happening in actual history that have to be addressed, but are also like thrown in there. If not, like I don't want to say like given levity, but at least like treat it respectfully, but also they slip it in there as a twist of a parody knife, if you will. I guess best way I can describe it. So all that to say, I'm giving dialogue probably one of the strongest ones. So
yeah,
go, guys.
I agree. I really love the dialogue in this, and I thought that everyone did all the actors did a great job, obviously, but the script was so tight and solid. Like you get this kind of cast, and it's hard to fail with this script like this. Like
yeah, true. It's a stellar performance for everybody.
It's just a really funny and dark script, and like those are two of my favorite things. Obviously, when you combine them well,
I'm with you.
So like, yeah, it's just I think it was strong front to back. I really dig the dialogue in this.
This would have been a really easy script to fuck up. It really would. As much as I said about Buscemi, in a lot of ways, could have overplayed this. The script could have too.
Yeah,
there were a couple great lines, like Anderson from Sherlock. He called him like he was the designer, and he called him something like Style Hitler or something like that. It was just, I mean, you get like
dropped in there,
yeah. You get little quips like that, but overall, there was a gravitas to it. There was a seriousness to it. In its satire, I thought it walked the line really, really, really well. I'm definitely giving it a very strong one. It was a really well scripted film.
I will put a caveat here, though, is that I think we all appreciate British humor here.
It's more for us.
I think that if you don't like British humor, you're going to be turned off.
You might be a little turned off.
Yeah.
True. But if you're into it, like by and large, it really works quite a bit. So, yep, one's all around. All right, Chris, tell us about the style.
The style is really interesting because it did remind me a lot of kind of like, it was kind of muted in a lot of ways, like you would see like during the 80s films of like, Soviet history. It was I'm blocking the name of the documentary style. I don't know. My whole point is it did a really good job of the way it was filmed, that it was shot on film. You could tell. If not, they did some really great filter work on it. It really did have a verisimilitude about it that really grounded any kind of comedic elements to it that there were. It was very, in a lot of ways, what you'd expect, but it was exactly what it needed. I'd give it a very strong one. Again, part and parcel with dialogue, what I said with this is a very fine line you're walking between parody and reality, which again, truth is stranger than fiction. I'm going to be in a very strong one. I very much like the style of this film.
Well, I haven't done this in a while, but I want to discuss it's a very effective in genre as a comedy piece, as you were mentioning, Chris. But there's not only were there a lot of witty pieces of dialogue, which we just talked about in the last section, but there are a lot of great visual gags here. So particularly what I want to mention is it's such a simple scene, but they're all trying to be the first to be behind the car with the coffin.
I almost brought that up.
And then they all block each other in, and then the bear steps out to tip his hat, so everyone follows him. So they're not respectful. He runs back into his car, so he's the first one. It's it's comedy 101, but it's handled so perfectly.
Executed beautifully. Yeah, I definitely agree. So, like I said, the 0.5, like historical accuracy, I have to give him credit on that for sure. And just like in general, like, yeah, some of the shots just look really great. I think you're right, Chris. It does look like it was shot on film versus like digital or anything like that. Or if there was a filter, it's very well done. But like just the shots of the Russian countryside, like the huge castles and the mansions and the headquarters of Moscow, like all the rooms and the corridors, and the funeral scene, I think, is a big standout, like visually, cinematography, I'd say. So yeah, like it all works really well, and it does straddle that line, like you said, like with being both respectful but comedic at the same time to the material.
They also did a fantastic job of making everyone look like the people they're trying to portray.
Yeah,
it's shockingly accurate.
Yeah,
cinema verite is the word I was looking for. Cinema verite, because there was a graininess about it, but
Yeah, exactly. So I think it all works damn well, and maybe equal along with dialogue. It's style is one of the strongest points of the film. So
yeah, I agree. I think that the style of this is super strong. There's just if this movie didn't look as slick as it did and like as good as it did, it would have knocked it down a lot. And just like getting everything right in terms of the shots that they wanted to get, and like
totally agree.
The background soundtrack and everything like that, or score and everything.
The score was really good. Good call, Steve.
Is very, very solidly done, and I got to give it full marks for that. So it's a 1.
Yeah. All right. Very nice. All right. So why don't you keep talking, Steve? Bringing us on home. Do you in fact recommend The Death of Stalin, the film, and also The Thing?
Yeah, I'm all right with Stalin's death, and I'm all right with The Death of Stalin. So, I do recommend this movie. I saw it a little while ago, and I have been recommending it to people since that time. It's definitely worth a watch, and you'll learn a little something. You'll have a couple laughs, and you come out of it a fuller person, I think.
No, I agree.
I'm oddly probably not going to recommend this.
Okay.
Even though I really enjoyed the film, it's just that I think it's aimed at a particular type of person.
Yeah, I get what you mean. True.
And I'd recommend it to all of you. And that's about it of the people I know.
Fair enough.
Because it's a weird thing of both British humor and also a historical piece. And that's a very niche market.
It's a very small, I get you.
So on that, I love it, but it's for me.
You wouldn't necessarily broadly recommend it. Well, you think, Chris?
I agree with Ian 100%, except that coming from a family of amateur historians.
But you are going to recommend it? Go on.
Only because there are enough people that I would recommend it to, because there are enough people like us that I know. Because objectively, if this were in a vacuum where like I didn't know people like you had interest in it, like I'd only seen it once and I wanted to watch it again because
you have to break out of your echo chamber, sir.
Like I would recommend.
If your echo chamber is all people that want to watch Death of Stalin, stay there.
All right, so to the general masses, call this a cop-out. You guys can decide if you're going to give it a 1 or 0. To the general populace, I'd say no. If you're a history
buff, I get you guys. Yeah.
Like I said, I come from a family of amateur historians, so I know enough people that I might recommend this to. But by the same token, I probably will fall on the side of a 0 because it is not something I would recommend to just everybody.
Okay.
It'd definitely be something of a niche, and I'd recommend it to Beth and a few other people. But it's not a film I'd go screaming to the rooftops to say like, "Oh, you have to see this," or like I would do with like something like Lighthouse or Jojo Rabbit or something like that, or The Farewell or something like from last year.
You would recommend Lighthouse to the general populace over Death of Stalin?
Yes.
That is a weird.
That's what he said.
That's a weird thing.
Because the thing is, if you're not interested in this period of time, the film loses.
It's going to turn you off, like you said. Ian. I get you.
Yeah. All right. I don't know. We can have this conversation after cast, but that blew my mind.
Like I do get it. Like I see you guys' point. I am going to recommend it because it's technically my pick for like vague comedy month or vague comedy era that we're doing. But I do see that. But I think like I'm gonna maybe like leverage the fact that if you do like it, like to some degree, or moderately to greatly enjoy it, then that might spur you to, in fact, look into the historical aspects of it, which I think can be a beneficial thing to it. And
Yeah, but we're all nerds.
yeah, no, I get it. I get that. But I'm saying I still would definitely largely recommend it, like, as a whole, more than I wouldn't just even beyond like that little niche of mindset, like nerds like us, right? I'd recommend it to friends of ours who I know aren't as much into it, but I still think they would enjoy this film, even if they don't extract as much from it for that angle. But I still think it's enjoyable enough, a good romp, well done comedy about a certain specific historical event that if you do know more about it, again, you get more out of it a little bit, or maybe it'll spur you to look into it. But either way, I'm giving it officially one to recommend, but I totally see your guys' point or angle or reasoning for giving it a 0. All right, so with that, any final thoughts, anything missed or wanted to add before I give out the tally?
No, I think you guys might be underestimating the appeal of this film, Ian and Chris, but I will let
I'm not, because I looked at the Rotten Tomato scores versus the I think Metacritic scores.
No.
Yeah,
and it's critically loved and
Audiences
considered
like,
mediocre
it's okay.
by
Yeah.
like, the
But
general
there is some
populace.
precedent in that Beth, even more so than me, is like she's been watching the Medici series, and I know the Medici and Henry, like, you know, that whole area because of my music history. But generally speaking, I know Beth's really into history, and I'm into history probably a little less than she is. And I just know, like I said, it would, if we didn't have a binary scale, it would come on a 0.5 for me.
Sure.
But generally speaking, because I know my target audience, I'd probably have to go on a 0 just because
I got you.
quantity versus, you know.
Like I said, I can see it falling either way, so you guys decided, and that's perfectly fine. So let me give it out the scores. Steve-O, you've given it a perfect 10, which I imagine you don't think it's necessarily a perfect 10 film, but on our scale.
Yeah, I wouldn't give it a 10, but yeah, I think it's up there.
But it's strong enough for that. So I've given it with a 9, and you guys, Chris and E, because of the recommendation, and Steve-O, you give it a perfect 3 to plot. The rest of us 2s. Recommendations where we split. So 8.75 overall, which is still very strong. I think I'm happy with that, really. Like, I think it does deserve that. It was going to be a 9 because I assumed one of you would reckon, like I was doing the math just previously. But I think, 8.75. It's a strong, enjoyable film with a smaller caveat / asterisk. If you're into this kind of stuff / British humor / history / both, you'll probably extract more enjoyment from it, entertainment from it. But overall, still solid, still good film, and I'm excited to see. I would check out anything Armando Iannucci does next.
Well, he did.
I really want to see Deep.
Yeah, there you go. And David Copperfield.
He did David Copperfield, so you should watch that eventually.
Yeah, we will in fact do that. But there it is. Death of Stalin gets his 8.75, both the film and I suppose the event itself.
Oh, Tilda Swinton's, I think, in the David Copperfield.
Oh, she is. That's right.
Yes.
Chris,
so as a teaser at the end, she Tilda's in it.
That was my recommendation back in January. I put up on the schedule.
Very nice.
There you go.
All right. Well, that'll do it.
Peter Capaldi's in it too. So
cool.
Nice.
Well, I think that'll do it for the Death of Stalin episode. I have been here bearing the coffin of Stalin himself. I've been Scott Thurlow with my fellow Paul Bearers in Circle, Jonathan Ian Manzer.
Your hallway's incredibly creepy.
I know. Thank you. And Stephen Amosi.
I believe there's a demon back there. Yes, goodbye.
There certainly is. And Chris Morgan.
Rimsky-Korskov.
Yep. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Good night.
Vidanya, comrades.
That's Vidanya.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or mods?